So we're back to Derech Hashem. And what's important, what we begin to see is certain very, very fundamental ideas. The first idea which we see so far is that the choice in a person's life, there's only one of two paths. Either you get eternity and you become close to God and you attach to God, or you're annihilated, or you don't exist anymore. There's no in between, you see. I get a kick out of these people who think about eternal damnation, that you can actually do things which will eternally damn you, put you in Gehenna to be roasted, so to speak, for an infinite amount of time. You know what I'm saying? It's absurd when you think about that kind of idea. And there are religions that believe in eternal damnation. You know what I'm saying? You think about that. An infinite amount of time is really a long time, right? There is no sin, I don't care who it is, that the seriousness is so great that you could be eternally damned, which means eternally roasted. There's no such sin. Even Hitler, Yamach Shemoy, right? As grievous as his sin was, which is, we cannot even comprehend, what he's going through now, but even that act has an end. It's not infinite. You know what I'm saying? So the real concept is there's only two choices. Either you exist in Olam Haba, the future world, and you enjoy the tremendous attachment to God called Vekas, or you're annihilated, which means you cease to exist. That's it. There's no in between. So, now, obviously what determines that is your acts, your deeds. That's what determines, obviously, which way you're going to go. Nothing else determines it but your actions. There is no such thing as predetermination. There's a what's the name? Calvinism. It's a Christian denomination. Calvinism. He believed that there are people who are born that are determined to be in Gehenna. They couldn't do anything about it. It's predetermined. He believed that there was no free will, and that there are people that are destined to go to Gehenna, hell, whatever they call that place, right? And there are people destined to go to heaven. It's basically not your choice, which of course is so contrary to Judaism. The only thing that determines where you go is your acts, your actions, and that's it. There is nothing else. Nobody's out to get you, right? And there's no predetermination, of where you're going to go. This whole belief of that is completely anti-logic, and it's anti-Judaism. Besides, it says in the Torah, "Ubochalta b'chaim," and you will choose life. So that automatic is a refutation. Anyway, so that's the deeds. Now, the Ramchal also posits a very important principle that what the Rebbe Hashem does is he looks at the majority of your acts in your life. And that, as I mentioned, is both qualitative and quantitative. How many, right? Because it's not only how many you did, but also the weight, the gravity of the sin itself. So you may have done less sins, but what sins you did do were terrible. You see, so the Rebbe Hashem decides, he judges the quantity and the quality of your deeds in your lifetime, and the majority determines. That is the factor. That's another principle which Ramchal laid down, which is very, very important. That it is the majority. Okay? That determines. If the majority of your deeds, we know, right, was good, which is whatever good means, then you are a member of Olam Haba. You will get the future world. If, however, the majority of deeds are evil, in whatever way God determines that, right, then you will not get Olam Haba, okay? And instead you will be annihilated, which means you will cease to exist. That's a sole determinant. However, the minority has to be dealt with, okay? So the majority is what gets you to be a member for Olam Haba. But the minority has to be dealt with. If your majority is good deeds, but your minority is bad, then the bad has to be dealt with, because that's justice. It cannot be ignored. If you are majority is evil, and you have a minority of good deeds, right, then that also cannot be ignored, because the guy can say, hey, I did some good, and is there any person that was completely evil, that he has nothing in his life that was good? No. There's no such thing. It's impossible, in fact, Like I said, if you ever want to take one of these Nazi guys, and they fed their parakeet, Tsar Baalei Chaim, or if the guy listened to his mother, or any even if a guy or somebody he's do me a favor, I need a little money for a bus, it's okay, I'll lend you $1, it's a good deed, even though he's a Nazi and later on he killed who knows how many Jews and so on, right? So therefore, what justice demands is that the minority must be addressed, even by an evil person, right? The minority of his deeds must be addressed, and therefore he must be rewarded in that sense for the minority good deeds that he's done.
It's not so far-fetched. I read an article that shows there's a dichotomy between what they're doing in the camps, and then some of them even weren't Nazis per se, but they were supposedly civilians that helped the Nazis all out, and then went home and lived normal lives where they could have done favors for neighbors.
Yeah.
It's meaning that's things like that happen where they
Yes.
committed atrocities and they just went home.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. Of course.
So they have to be. There are consequences for helping your neighbor.
Yes. Of course. Nobody does completely all evil, and nobody's completely all good. Like it says, "Ain't tzaddik ba'oretz asher yaseh tov v'lo yechta." There's no such thing as a tzaddik, a righteous person, right, that does only good and doesn't sin. Everybody sin. You see. In fact, there are only 4 people that are brought down that never sinned, although it's very difficult to understand how that can be, but there are only 4 people. Okay, if I remember correctly, it was Binyamin was 1, right? Yishai was 2, Kolev, the son of David HaMelech, was 3, and I'm trying to remember number 4.
David himself had a brother, I think. David HaMelech himself, his brother.
No, Yishai was one of them.
Not one of his sons was?
And Kolev, who's the son of David.
So I've done it.
Yeah, I'm not recalling the 4th. But anyway, they're the only ones that have done only good and never sinned, which is really astounding when you think about that. To go through a life and never sin, it's unheard of.
Especially if you were married.
Seems to me that God holds very righteous people to a higher standard.
Yes, definitely.
So when you say qualitative, like in the Torah, Sarah is complaining about not having a child, and Abraham said, "What do you want from me? I'm trying. What?
Yeah, okay.
And God came really down on him for that, talking to Sarah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sure. Yeah.
So
The reason for that is not because God wants to come down hard on them. You see, because every time God deviates from justice, there is what's called namadik sufa. Then there is a shame. In other words, if he deviates from justice and he exercises mercy, right, to that extent, then the individual that God is deviating from justice will have an embarrassment in the future world for that deviation. That's namadik sufa, you see. Therefore, the only thing that can prevent bread of shame, which I talked about, right, is exact justice. It means you must get exactly what you did, not more or less. But when God is merciful, then what that does is it increases the shame because he is merciful, right? Thank God for that, for the person. But really, once he deviates, then it's not measure for measure. In other words, the mercy has been introduced in this person's actions, so it's not measure for measure anymore. You see, God is now stepping back, and that means that person in the future world, right, will have bread of shame. There will be a certain amount of namak sufa, as they say. Therefore, the tzaddik wants God to be exacting. Like it says, that God is exacting with tzaddikim kachut asayra, like a hair's breadth. You know what I'm saying? And so on. And therefore, they will not have any bread of shame, because they will get exactly what they did. They will get as a reciprocity. You see? And that's why. So they really want that.
A guy today, where the wife can't bear children, and the husband goes, "What do you want from me? We're trying. It's not up to me." God's not going to come down on a regular guy today.
No, not on a regular guy. No. We're talking about really what's called tzaddikim gemurim. We're talking about guys who are really almost totally righteous. These are the ones, because in the end, they want God to be strict, so they don't have any kind of embarrassment at all that God deviated from justice.
Yaakov wanted to be, wasn't that where it says that Yaakov, when he made the promise on Har HaMoriah, that if Hashem protects him, then he will do certain things.
Yeah.
And one of them was V'yisem, that Hashem should be Elokim. And I've heard, and I haven't seen it inside, but I've heard that he was accepting on himself Midas Hadin, that Hashem should treat him a lot more with Midas Hadin than with Rach.
Yeah, because he doesn't want embarrassment in the future world. That God, bent over backwards, so to speak. You know what I'm saying?
So
that's why.
People who are not Tzaddik and Gemurim, what happens to the Namak Sufa? Because they can't survive under them.
They won't survive if God doesn't exact some type of mercy.
So once there's mercy,
in the beginning, look, there's a medrash that says, in when the Torah refers to God, it refers to him as Elokim, right. And then it refers to him Yud Kei Vav Kei, because he had to mix in Rachmanis, mercy, or else nobody survives.
Right, you said that.
It's what's called a necessity.
Once Rachamim happens, then there's Namak Sufa.
What?
Once Rachamim happens, then there's Namak Sufa.
Yes.
But for people who can't survive without Namak Sufa, how do they get Tikkun?
For people who can't what?
People who can't survive without Rachamim, how do they get rid of their Namak Sufa?
Probably what happens, that's a good question actually,
The second question, which is ancillary to that, isn't Rachamim not removal of justice, but an alteration of justice to make it more survivable?
Yeah.
So really, a person will be getting justice. Just, for example, it'll be spread out, or...
Yeah, but the fact that they can survive without justice, even if it be for one day, automatically is God is bending over backwards.
So what's Misaki in that? So let's say now there's 5% Namak Sufa.
Yeah, I know. Maybe it could be that nothing is Misaki in that.
Maybe it goes to the tzaddik. Maybe the tzaddik now has to be Misaki.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, in other words, there has to be an alternative way.
You just won't get that Olam Haba.
Yeah. It could be that maybe somebody else will have accepted his judgment where there is no mercy, and that in a certain sense will alleviate his Namak Sufa, But there will be work. Whatever,
God says, "I'll be gracious to who I'll be gracious to. My ways are not your ways."
But that's the question. In any case, this is really in many ways the fundamental idea of how the world operates. Now, what's also very important is there's a problem here. What is the problem? The problem is this. What happens if a guy, his majority is good, right? So he will get the future world. Yes? Because his majority is good. But wait a minute. What happens if a guy's majority, let's assume his majority is 90% good, right? And he's 10% bad. So therefore the 10%, which is the minority, correct, has to be dealt with in this world, which means that either he does tshuva, repentance, and if he doesn't repent, then he has to go through suffering, which is the way he can be atoned. But that's for a person whose minority is, let's say, very small. Most of it is good, and his minority is, very little. He's got 90% great, good, and he got 10% bad. So therefore, if he doesn't do tshuva, and he has to experience suffering, then the suffering in this world will compensate. In other words, the suffering that he gets in this world can in many ways erase, right, the debt of being bad. But what happens if a guy has 51% good, 49% bad, right? And he doesn't repent in any way, right? Well, what's God going to do with this guy? I mean, how many times can you kill a guy? You know what I'm saying? I mean, how much suffering, look, physically, a person can suffer a certain amount, but if the suffering goes beyond what he can endure, he dies. So what happens if his 49% means that you have to suffer, terribly, where he can't even survive, naturally can't survive. So then what's he going to do? You see? So it comes out that you can't even give him suffering here because in a natural way he can't survive because he got 49% bad. You see? So that becomes a real big problem. You see? So what does God do? So what the God did is very interesting. What the Hashem did is very interesting. He said, okay, if you have a minority of bad, but the minority is not so big, so you can suffer in this world and you don't repent. So the suffering in this world can alleviate, right, all the sins that you did. But what happens, like I say, if it cannot alleviate the suffering cannot alleviate because there's an enormous percentage, even though it's a minority of bad, then God created a spiritual suffering in the world of souls. That's the concept of Gehenna. That's really what it is, you see. And over there, you can subject the guy to much greater suffering because he can't die, he's already dead. You know what I'm saying? There's no problem here with death, because the suffering takes place in where? In the world of souls, right? When you go to Gehenna, a person goes to Gehenna, his neshama goes to Gehenna. There's no body there, right? He can't die, like I said, he's already dead, right? Yet in that world, he can suffer much greater than in this world, you see, and therefore expiate all the bad that he did. So the concept of Gehenna is an unbelievable chesed, kindness, you see. So what it does, it ensures that almost everybody can get the future world. Because as long as you have a majority. But even if you have a majority of 51% and 49%, right, is really bad, yes, then that 49% now has a place that he can be expiated, atoned for. You see how it works? And that place is called Gehenna, hell, whatever you call it, whatever the English word, purgatory, and so on. That's the English word for it, right? And over there, you can subject the guy to much greater suffering than this world, because like I say, he can't die, he's dead. You see? So what God did is he created a place that can basically erase even a major minority of bad. You see? So in that sense, if it wasn't for Gehenna, a lot more people would never be in Olam Haba. You know what I'm saying? Because they can't expiate their bad stuff because it's just too great. You see what I'm saying? So therefore, the fact that God created in the soul world a purgatory, a place where they can't suffer, far more than this world. So therefore, even those people basically who have the majority of good, but a very big minority of bad, can also expiate, which means it can be atoned for, and they can get the future world. Very important concept. of the concept of Gehenna. Gehenna allows many people who would have really difficulty getting into the future world, right? It allows them to get into the future world because there's now another situation or place that they can atone for what they did. So it comes out that as long as you have a majority, you know, and even if it's a very big minority of bad, evil stuff, it can be expiated. You see, which is interesting, you know. So that's one major way that people can get into the future world, and that is why most people get into the future world, into Olam Haba. You see. Now there's a second way, you see, and that way is called Gilgul Reincarnation. What reincarnation does is it brings you back, right? And it really does two things. If you didn't finish your job of tikkun, whatever your assignment was, right? If you didn't finish it in one lifetime, then you can come back and finish it in a second lifetime, or a third, or a fourth, and so on. So you have many, it's like taking an exam. You know, you failed, so they allow you to take the exam over again.
Makeup test.
Makeup, exactly, right? Again and again and so on. And the concept, therefore, of reincarnation, right, is a tremendous chesed. It's a tremendous act of kindness. Because, like I said, you know, it's a makeup test, you know, and you can repeat the test 1,000 times. You see, each time getting closer and closer to the situation where you will have done your tikkun, your rectification. You see, but also it does the opposite. You can suffer in one lifetime, come back, suffer again, come back, suffer again. You see, so it works both ways. You know what I'm saying? So you can come back. Oh, it's a terrible thing to think about. But listen, I imagine if you ask the guy himself, listen, in lifetime one, you were pretty bad. You know, you killed a couple of people. I mean, you're really bad stuff. You know, you got a choice. You know, either we annihilate. You know, either we put you through Gehenna because you got to deal with that minority. You know, so, you know, or you come back many times and you suffer, you know, what would you rather have? You got to deal with this bad stuff. Of course the guy's going to say, listen, as long as I get into the club, you know, as long as I get into the future world, okay, you know. I mean, all this stuff is finite, it'll end someday. And meanwhile, for eternity, I'll be in the future world, you see. So therefore, a guy can come back many times, you see, in a very bad situation. And God, of course, judges that, and that in many ways expiates him even in the physical world. So it's not just the soul world, you see. So when you add everything together, right, the majority gets you into Olam Haba. The minority of bad has to be removed, and there's one of two ways. Either you come back in the physical world many times, and in each lifetime you suffer a great deal, or, right, and if that's not enough, right, you can suffer in the soul world, the neshama suffers, right, and as a result of that, you can also expiate. And they're both chesed, they're both tremendous kindnesses that God has created in order to ensure that most 99% of the people, right, who have a majority of good, will get into Olam Haba. Yeah.
Here's an example. I got 60% bad, 40% good. You negotiate with God and say, cut out.
No.
Wait. Hear me out.
Yeah.
Cut out the 60% bad, put it on another soul, send me back in Gilgul, take my 40% good, Olam Haba, and I'll deal with those sins in the next lifetime with the 60% bad and do tshuva.
No, doesn't work. You have to understand something. When I say that there is majority, there's something else that goes on. It's not only which is the majority, which is something else I was going to say anyway now. It's not just the number which means quality or quantity. Certainly quantity, but it's also the type of sins that God looks at. I'll give you an example, okay, which is I'll bring this down, okay. It could be that a guy, he's got a majority of mitzvahs or majority of good deeds, whatever that is, right? But he's got a big minority, but he has either a large minority of bad deeds, or he may not have a large minority of bad deeds. In other words, he may have 70%, 80% good. The problem is the 30% or 20% of bad deeds is terrible. Because we're not just looking here at number, we're looking at quality. You see, what happens if the guy was he was a thief and a murderer? But funny that he was also good, and he actually has a majority of good. But his bad deeds were so horrendous, right? So then what does God do? So what you have to understand is that God also evaluates the bad deed itself. You see, also evaluates the bad deed itself. So what he may do is, because that person has such really horrendous, terrible bad deeds, you see, so what God may do is that the guy has a majority of good deeds. Fine. And those good deeds would give him a certain position or status in the future world, right? Let's assume he did 70% good. And based on the 70%, it's not only enough to get him in, but they actually give him a certain status, an elevated status in the future world, you see. But he did 30%, not just 30%, but it's really horrendous stuff. Okay, so here's what God does. What he's going to do, therefore, is take 15% of his good deeds, right? Because remember, 70 would have given a tremendous status. So God will take, but because of the 30% of horrendous stuff, God will take 15% of his good deeds, right? And give it to him here in the physical world. So even though he still gets into the future world, because he still has a majority, right? But he cannot in any way complain, because God now took the 15% of good, which could have elevated him in the future world in a much higher status. But what God did, he says, okay, I'm going to give it to you here in this world, so, the guy can become a multi-billionaire, whatever, and therefore he'll get the future world because that's the majority. However, he could have been much higher, so he's demoted in the future world because he got the good stuff here. Besides the fact that he has to atone for the bad stuff. But like I say, the bad stuff was so bad that God says, look, your bad stuff, and God judges. He knows how to judge. That bad stuff is so good that it so corrupted you, that I cannot allow you to have such a status in the future world. What do you mean? But they're good deeds. Fine. So I'll give it to you here. You see? And that's also a very, very interesting concept, that God not only measures the number, you see, but he looks also at the quality of the bad that you did. And we know, let me give you an example. We're assuming the person doesn't do tshuva, remember, that he doesn't repent. This is a problem, because if repented, right, then it would help him. God would not do this. But we're assuming he doesn't repent, and he's stuck with this terrible deed. Now, what kind of a deed can be so terrible? Besides murder and, and slaughter and all that kind of stuff, right? One of the terrible deeds is Masira, to inform to the government on what that guy's doing. And and the Chazal say on Masira, right, on informing to the government, that's what Masira is. To inform to the government, right? Hey, you call up the tax division, right? I think you work for the tax division, and say, I'm very annoyed at Ruvain, Well, I want to tell you something, And he calls up the tax division. I'm just showing, And he says, by the way, I think Ruvain's cheating on his tax, right? Now I don't know how it works over there, but let's say, okay, thank you for the advice. He informed Masira to a government agency that now goes after, let's say, Reuven, And Mesira is a terrible sin. I'm not in any way, making a comment. Should a person call the tax? I'm not in any way involved myself. What the right way? I'm just giving an example. Or a guy can say, especially today, it's a little more difficult. In the old days, when there was a king, right? He can call up the king, the ambassador, and say, by the way, somebody just said terrible statements about you, right? And all of a sudden, guess what? They go after the guy. And in the old days, you can get killed for that kind of stuff. I mean, the classic story is Reb Shimon. Remember the classic story, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai? They were talking about the Roma. He was there with, I think, Papas Ben Yehuda and Rabbi Yehuda, Reb Shimon, Rabbi Yehuda, and I think and Papas Ben Yehuda, whatever. They were talking about the Roman government, And one of them said, I think. Papas Ben Yehuda said, one of them said, the Romans, look what they did, they built roads and all that, and one of them was silent. And the other one, Reb Shimon, he said, whatever they do for themselves, you see. And I think it was Papas Ben Yehuda, he went home, he didn't call up the government and say, you know what Reb Shimon Bar Yochai said about you? He said it to his family. By the way, Reb Shimon, but somehow that leaked out, the government found out, and Reb Shimon had to run away for 12 years in that cave because he was moiseh him. He informed on him, even unwittingly and by accident. But that type of a sin, to inform in terms of the authorities of what you did, is a terrible deed, and it's so terrible that they say Gehenim Kola, that Gehenna will run out of fire long before you stop suffering. That's what they say on Mesira. Very bad, very bad. In fact, there was a tremendous amount of moisture in the time of Chazal, and they made a bracha, the 19th bracha. It's called a malchim. And to the informers, alti tikva, there shouldn't be any hope. Could you imagine to make a bracha in Shmoneh Esrei to get these guys? Could you imagine every Jew who davens every day is davening that the Malshinim should be destroyed? It's incredible, because in those days apparently there were a lot of Jews who were informing on other Jews, you see. So that type of a deed, you see, can easily kill you, besides destroy your life, because we're not talking about telling somebody else what you said about them. No, you're talking about a government authority saying that, and so on. So that kind of a deed is terrible, you see. And what that could be is that God was okay. The majority of what you did is good, believe it or not. But since you did this, you know what I'm saying? I will deduct from your status in the future world, right? And I'll take away the good, give it to you here or the next life, whatever God does. But you are held in an incredible inferior position in the future world. You see, which is when you think it's amazing, because I'm just giving an example of Mesira, which is a terrible sin. Which, like I said, with Chazal, they ordained a bracha in Shmoneh Esrei to get rid of these guys and so on, But so this is clearly one of the anhogas of the Rebbeinu Shalom, of what He will do. So God weighs not just the amount of sins, but He looks at the type of sin you did, and some of them are literally just beyond belief. What a guy does. That's why, and unfortunately, you find a lot of Mesira terribly among Jews. Especially it's a guy wants to build something in his backyard, and all of a sudden the guy calls up the whatever the authorities, right? What?
Township.
He calls up the township, say this guy's building a sukkah, whatever, It's Mesira. They don't realize that they are subjecting themselves. Even if they get Olam Haba, they are going to be in an inferior status, in Olam Haba. Why would they do that? They have no concept of the incredible danger that they are putting themselves in by being moiseh, by being informing on other Jews. It's one of the worst things you can do to a Jew is inform on him to a government authority. I'm not talking about somebody who commits a crime. Don't get me wrong. On the contrary, a guy commits a crime. The guy's a predator. You know what I'm saying? Molester, child molester. I'm not talking about that. But I'm talking about something which is not necessarily, it's not really a crime in that sense, where he's harming others. It's just that he did something, which is, maybe illegal, but it's not a criminal kind of thing, And Masira is a very serious crime. There are all kinds of laws about that, but you would see it concerned Chazal, I mean, if you have a grievance against somebody, there are ways of doing that, you know what I'm saying? Then take them to Bezdin, so they'll look at you fairly, You go call up the government, the authorities in the government, God knows what they can do to you, I mean, the people have been destroyed, literally, because of people informing on them to the higher authorities and so on and so forth, But in any case, so that's what Ramchal says. You can deduct your status and your position in the future world, even if you have the majority, and even if you get into the future world, if you're going to sin, make it light. Like they say, Miller Lite, right? Make it light. Don't do the sins which are terrible, horrendous and so on, That's a very, very unwise course. What was that?
Yeah. Don't be a big rush.
Well, don't be a rush to harm it, but there's also like
the what?
I heard a Chazal that said that if a person feels himself that if he eventually succumbs, whether right or wrong, he comes to the Yetzer Hara, he should dress himself in all black, and he should
go out somewhere else.
So it's something where he should basically minimize the experience as much as possible, even if a person finds some. I don't know if it's a real.
Because then it's not as.
I don't know if I just heard from somebody offhand or if it's an actually the Chazal said such a thing.
Yeah.
But the person should basically do things to minimize
the sin.
The sin,
yeah.
The pleasure, and to somehow make him realize, put in the back of my mind the whole time, this is something that's wrong.
Yeah. Let me tell you, and I'll close with this. This is brought down by, I think, Rav Shvadron. Anyway, there was a story where there used to be a town, and there was a moiser, terrible. He used to, whenever he had the opportunity, he would call up the government or whatever agency was responsible, and he got, and he was, I think it was named Yossel the Moiser. He even called him Moiser, and so, so the Koznitz, I think it was the Koznitz Magid, he used to travel, he was an itinerant Magid, means he used to travel from town to town, and he asked, well, what's wrong in this town? They would tell him, and he would get up there and give a whole drasha. Everybody came because he was very famous, I think Koznitz Magid, So he once came to this town that this Yossel the Moiser was in, and they said, we have a terrible problem. We got a Moiser here, an informer, what do they call him? A stool pigeon, whatever.
Rat.
Yeah, rat, whatever, it's a common language. But anyway, so the Koznitz Magid got up, and he talked about Masira, the einish of Masira, what God does. I mean, he really gave it his all, as they say. Anyway, and then he left the town, and then when he again went around to speak a couple of years later, actually, he came to the town, and he wanted to find out whatever happened to Yossel the Moiser. Whatever happened to, So he went around asking, before he was going to speak, says, where's Yossel the Moiser, So he said, Yossel the Moiser? There's no Yossel the Moiser here, So like he was shocked. What do you mean no Moiser? This guy was like the worst, So he went around asking and so on. So one guy said, Yossel the Moiser? There's no Yossel the Moiser, there's Yossel the Tzaddik. The Tzaddik, So he said, Yossel the Tzaddik? What are you talking about? Yeah, he used to be a Moisa, but now he davens all day, he learns Torah all day, you know? So the Maggid says, wait a minute, I want everybody in the town to come to the drasha I'm going to give. Gather them all up in the big shul. So they all gathered in the shul, you know? And in the front was Yosel the Tzaddik, you know? So the Koshnim Samagid got up at the pulpit, the bima, the whatever, and he looked at Yosel the Tzaddik, right? And he said, you are a Tzaddik? You are Rasha Marusha. He gave that guy, you're going to burn in Gehenna. You have no idea what's going to happen to you. You're one of the most evil people that I've ever seen. You're a Rasha Marusha. And Yosel the Tzaddik, like he was like, and the town couldn't believe what was going on. You know what I'm saying? Because he had changed, you see? So then he said to him, even though you've changed, why are you still a Rasha? Because you didn't ask any of the people for mechila. Who cares what you do? What you did was terrible between a man and his neighbor. You never asked them for mechila, you know? So he got up, so he said, get up, turn to the whole town in the shul there, and you have to ask mechila from everybody. And he was like crying, he was like, as a ice mensch, you know? And he said, and the town was mechalim because he had done tshuva. He said, oh, now you're Yosel the Tzaddik. It just shows you know, you can't play around, you know? This is a very important concept of Ben Adam Chaveroi. You know, you want to be a tzaddik and all of a sudden do tshuva, fine. But how many lives did you destroy? You know, how much evil did you do when you wore that Moisa? You got to ask the mechila, you know. But in any case, that's a story with the Kazhin Samagid. But in any case, it's very important to know that God weighs the sin itself. It's not just the number. There are certain averos which are terrible for the person. And what the Baruch will do, that even though you get Olam Haba, which is interesting, you know, because you've got a majority, but you've got a terrible minority, and he will deduct your Olam Haba, which you should know one thing, that's the worst thing that can happen to you. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's like saying, okay, until now I would have given you $1 billion, and now I'll give you $10,000. I mean, you know, that's the equivalent, you know, because Olam Haba is where everything is at. That's the greatest state you could be in. So from God to deduct and then give you the reward here, and as a result of that, you have no claim. You know, of course it's going to be a big reward, because when you deduct something from Olam Haba, you know, and it's all of a sudden translated or transformed into this world, it's going to be an incredible thing. You know, you're going to have this business that's going to... How
would you know there was a deduction in the first place? You
don't. That's why you have to be careful. The Ramchal is bringing that as one of the actions of God. Yeah, we don't. I'm giving you one example of Masira. You know, there are certain sins which are terrible. You know, and so on. And the thing interesting is that there are what do you call it, complexities. There are many people that have a majority good. You know, in certain sense, they're very good. But in other things, they do terrible deeds. Now, you know, so I'm giving you an example of Masira as one of the deeds. And the Chazal really, you know, speak very terribly harsh about a Moisa and so on, you know. But there are others. There are others. But I'm saying that you know, even when a person does a sin, that is also part of the mix, as they say, about what God does and what He determines. So that's a very important idea. The concept that you can actually be in the future world, right? You can actually be there. But what you get is not necessarily always dependent on the majority. The minority of bad does make a determination of the extent of your Olam Haba. It's a very important idea, and so on, you know. Yeah, go ahead.
Why is it that always part as a malshin?
The what?
We understand a malshin informer, how serious that is, Jews
Yeah.
harm physically. Why does Chazal apparently put someone who lends his money on ribbis? Also, there's a pasuk in Yecheskel that Lochem,
Yeah.
What's this? They're both
Well, that's
happening One guy lends another guy money on rivers. They're both very happy about it.
Look,
Why is it such a
for that you have to go into the whole concept of why can't you take interest on a loan that you lent, right? What does it indicate? You know what I'm saying? But for whatever, I'm not going to go there now.
With that.
Yeah, in fact, that whole valley didn't get up. In Yechezkel, when he raised the bones of the whole valley, remember that? The one did not get up.
Right.
Yeah, that's bad news.
And the guy paying rivers is happy to pay the rivers. He could do his loan, his business now. He needs a loan.
Yeah, you know,
Then he's
I probably look there. There's a lot to think about in terms of ribbis. Why is it so severe and so on? You know, but what probably is, you know, it's just a thought. You know, although we're off topic. You know, all Jews are brothers to each other. You don't take interest from your brother. That's what it is. Because we fail to understand the true nature of the relationship that a Jew has with a Jew. You're not looking, we think, it's another guy, it's another person, you know, hey, I'm going to make money off him, you know, but he's not. You know what does it say? He's ochicha, because in fact the Torah used that term, ki yomach ochicha, if your brother get poor. What do you mean your brother? If the Jew gets poor, no, your brother. People, if your brother came over to you for a loan, would you take interest from him? Of course not. You'd say, hey, how much you need, you know, and so on, you know. That's probably the underlying concept, you know. You do not lend money to another Jew with interest, you know what I'm saying? Because he's your brother. That's the real relationship that he has with you. And you wouldn't take interest from your brother. What are you taking it from a Jew? And obviously a guy who's lending money, right, needs the money for whatever reason, right? He's desperate, he needs the money, he's short on cash flow, whatever it is, right? You know? So therefore, God says, listen, this person is really your brother. He's family. You don't lend interest on family. I mean, you don't charge interest on family. And you have to understand that. So therefore, that mitzvah is a derivative of the real relationship that Jews have to each other. You see? And that's what the Baruch Hashem said. And therefore you can't do that, and so on, you know. In any case, you know. But anyway, so we see therefore that it's not simple. You know what I'm saying? That you can actually disturb your Olam Haba, you know, by doing certain things which are terrible. And unfortunately, there are Jews. There are Jews that in certain ways they're very good. But there's certain Jews, like I pointed out, Masira, you know, informing, they'll inform on their neighbor. And the guy will get in terrible, terrible trouble. You know, not because it's a criminal act. Let's say it was illegal. You can't do that. You know what I'm saying? If you have a thing, so take him to a bezdin or whatever. But you don't subject him to something which can be vicious with him and destroy him. And believe me, that's what, most of the time, that's exactly what was in the olden days. You know, the kings and all those feudal lords and all that. You know, you got on their bad side, you were finished. You know what I'm saying? It's, you know, God forbid those kind of guys, you know, remember the Lord of the Manor, you know, you got on his bad side, he could destroy you. For what? Because anyway, a lot of these people don't practice justice. Remember, there's a big difference between justice and legal. This is the problem. There's a lot of laws in America that are illegal, but there's no justice. What do you give? Justice means a true compensation or a true reciprocity. You see? But there are many laws that don't make sense. You know what I'm saying? And what are you doing? Why are you exacting this type of law? You know, remember, the concept of legality or illegality is a decision by, let's say, the courts or the Congress or whatever. But who says that's just? You see? Only the Torah is just. So mankind has to try to be just. That was the problem. You know, if everything was truly just, that's one thing. But there are so many laws that are not just. You see, that the punishment is far more severe than what you did. You see? I mean, think about that. You know, if you compare the Torah laws to the laws of the country and so on, you know. There are many laws of the Torah that its punishment, you know what I'm saying, But you look at the laws of the country, they give you 30 years in prison. You know what I'm saying? How do you get 30 years in prison? You know, in the Torah, you did a sin, you get 39 makas, lashes. You know, so it's a setback, there's no question about that, right? And your doctor and all that, right? I mean, whatever, right? But then you go on with your life, you know? You put a guy in 20, 30 years in prison, that's the end of his life. But he's, you know, the purpose is to live and do tshuva and to go on with your life doing mitzvahs. Not spend 30 years behind bars. I mean, the concept of incarceration in many ways is insane. I mean, look, don't get me wrong. There's certain crimes which, of course, you know, incarceration makes sense. But there are many crimes, you know. You look at the Torah's, what the Torah says is the punishment, whatever, and you look at the court system, what the punishment is. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, what, 30 years in prison, that's the end of his life. You know, you just close it down. For what? You know? I want to tell you something. That's why America makes a tremendous mistake. Best type of punishment is what that? Corporal punishment. In Singapore, there's no crime. Because in Singapore, they have makas. They have lashes. You know, a guy before he commits a crime will think 40 times in Singapore before he does it than he does in America. You see? Because in Singapore, because when a person knows that he will be physically punished, that's much worse. But when a guy knows, okay, I'll go to prison for, you know, first of all, he can beat it. He can plea bargain. I mean, there's so many different, you know, maybe they won't catch him, and even if they do, you know, they'll throw it out, judge will throw it out, and even if he doesn't throw it out, he can plea bargain, you know, get a year or two, you know, and even if he has to go to prison, you know, he'll have a television in prison, you know, and all the other stuff that they give him, you know, some of the places, whatever, you know. Okay, nicht schlecht, you know, and then he can learn a lot how to commit more crimes because there's so many experts in prison. You know, what a school, what a, you know. It's like, you know, they ought to give graduate degrees. They ought to give PhDs. Yeah, they ought to give PhDs in how to become a criminal in a lot of these prisons because these guys are experts, you know. But you know, incarceration, you can do it to certain people, but it's wholesale in America. And what happens is you destroy the guy. You know, 20 years. One is to spend 1 year in prison. It's frightening. 5 years. I mean, the average crime is what, 10 years in prison or something like that? 5, 10 years? 10 years of a man's life, you know? Hey, give him 39 lashes and he won't do it again. Believe me, he won't do it again. You know, but put him in prison. I mean, whoever come up with these ideas of putting in prison, you know? You know? But anyway, okay, that's a whole discussion and so on.
Back on Gilgul, am I correct in saying that
there's
very few pure souls down in Jews now? Jews that are like now. Very few people.
Yeah, we're basically all recycled.
So all of us are damaged goods.
I hate to use the word damaged goods.
Well,
let's just say we are in need of repair. Better way of looking at it, you know.
One question on a Pasha?
Yeah.
It's Pasha. My mother, she was in elementary school in the 20s. She had an Irish teacher. Most of the class was Jewish in Brooklyn. PS 179, whatever you see. Irish teacher said to the class, out of nowhere, how can Rebecca pull the wool, literally, maybe that's where the expression came, for Isaac? He wanted to give the blessing to Esau. I think they know that Esau was their forefather. How could this woman, the mother, fool the righteous father to give the blessing to the wrong son, take advantage of the blind father? In his class of Jewish girls and boys. And my mother was shocked. You know, all the kids were shocked.
So what the answer?
So my mom didn't have no one answered. It was like 6th grade, you know. But we have the same question. What is the deeper meaning? Why did Hashem play it out that Rivka had to intercede to pull the wool over? I mean, it's a mind-boggling.
Yeah, look, there are many answers, to this question, you know. Fundamentally,
You got 2 hours now?
Two? 17 shir money.
I've heard.
I listened to all of them.
Look, there's a lot of stuff, but you have to know one thing. First of all, Yaakov bought the Bechorah. That's it. It was his.
Yeah.
And the blessings that Yitzchak was going to give Esav were the blessings for the Bechorah, for the firstborn. Right? That's number one. Second thing, right? Second thing, which you have to remember, Esav was an incredible Rasha. He was an evil person, right? He killed people. He was a murderer. He murdered people. He also was adultery committed left and right. That was his favorite one, is adultery, you know. He was a very bad person, you know. Imagine Yitzchak giving this type of bracha of, what was the bracha? Tremendous success in the world, right? Tremendous success. What would Esav do with that bracha? He would be a very successful mafia don. Right? He would be the head of the mafia. And he would be successful because Yitzchak gave him the bracha to succeed. That's suicide. You know what I'm saying? So really, when you think about that, the worst possible thing that Yitzchak could have done was give that bracha to Esav. Now, you know where you really see this? And I'll just finish with this. Because it says when Esav came by Yitzchak, right? And he said to Yitzchak, so Yitzchak said, who are you, right? You know. So Esav said, what do you mean? I'm your firstborn Esav. So it says there a very unusual thing. It says, Vayechrad Yitzchak charod gedola ad mi'oid. It says, and Yitzchak had this unbelievable attack of fear. Ad mi'oid, an incredible attack of fear. Now, here's what doesn't make sense. Think about that. What should have been the normal emotional reaction of Yitzchak? That he realized that Yaakov deceived him. His son, Yaakov, deceived Yitzchak, and Yitzchak knew it. Because here Esav is saying, give me the bracha, right? So immediately he deduced that the guy who did take the bracha was Yaakov. And Yaakov said, Ani Bechorah, I'm your firstborn Esav. So what should have been the normal reaction of Yitzchak? He should have been livid with rage. Right? Imagine, a guy makes an utter fool out of you. He lies to you, right? He lies, and then he tries to con you into giving him a blessing, and the blessing of Yitzchak was better than a bank. I mean, you know, it's very powerful stuff, you know? It's better than a CD in a bank. It was more guaranteed than a CD in a bank, right? So Yitzchak should have been livid with rage, right? He should have been so angry. He said, what? How could he have done this to me? I'll get him back. Or something like that, right? I'm going to punish him, right? Instead, hey, we got the wrong emotion here. It says Yitzchak had this unbelievable fear. Yes? Vayechrad Yitzchak charod gedola, an incredible fear, ad mi'oid, and there's another adverb, right? How do you understand that? And the answer is that Yitzchak, even though he knew Esav wasn't completely, he certainly was not a tzaddik, and Esav was a big sinner, he knew that. But he didn't know the extent of the evil of this man. So all of a sudden he realized that he almost gave this bracha, which is a blessing of incredible success, to one of the most evil people at that time. Could you imagine what Esav would have become with that blessing? So he realized how many people with that kind of success would Esav have killed? How many wives would he have taken? Right? I mean, you're talking about, Esav made John Gotti look like a kindergarten teacher. You have to know what Esav was a brilliant guy. You know, he's brilliant. And he had the power he was a very powerful man, you know. He wasn't just your local thief, you know. And imagine giving a blessing to John Gotti and saying, I want to bless you with material wealth, success in all your endeavors. Right? Can you believe this? Right? We laugh at this because it's absurd. You know how many people are going to die because of that blessing, or how many people are going to be lynched, or whatever, right? Think about that. And Yitzchak realized that. He almost gave Esav that blessing, which would have been enormously compound the evil of this man. And who knows how many victims would have suffered as a result of that. That's why Yitzchak realized, thank God I didn't give him that bracha. So therefore, the panic or the fear was because of the realization. What happened? I almost gave him that blessing. You see, that's panic, fear of what he would have caused to so many people had he given that to Yitzchak, to Esav. You see, now it makes sense. So therefore, Rebecca knew that. Rivka knew that. She says, what's going to happen here? You know, and I mean, there are other questions, but basically she said, hey, you must take, not only is it yours, you must take it, because you're going to kill a lot of people. You know, who knows what Esav is going to do to the world if he has that blessing from Yitzchak. He's what's called unstoppable. That's why Yitzchak had this incredible fear, which meant that Rivka was right. Of course, he realized that Rivka was right, or he realized that Yaakov, and then when it says, then right after this incident, Esav, he says, okay, I'm going to kill Yaakov when my father dies, right? And then Yaakov goes back to Yitzchak, and he blesses him again. You know, where's the anger at having been conned? You don't see no anger here, because that's why. The pasuk itself shows you that what Baruch Tia, that what Yaakov did was right, and what Rivka did, of course, was right. There you are. The pasuk itself declares what the story is all about. You know what I'm saying? They should have answered that.
My mother was 11 years old.
Okay.
The outfox the fox.
To go back just to the concept that you said of it's basically the concept of tzaddik toiv lo and
Rosh.
No, Rosh of toiv lo and tzaddik v'ra lo.
Yeah.
Which goes the other way around also.
The what?
The tzaddik has a big majority of good deeds, and a few of people who give him a bad word here,
Yeah.
give him a bigger status.
Yeah.
Up there. That's probably the
Well,
both sides in this time.
No. What the tzaddik did in terms of his deeds, that's his Olam Haba. But the main thing is to get rid of the sins.
Yes, that's what I mean. Why? Oh, just like
No, you don't get a better Olam Haba. What you get is you remove the obstacles from.
You don't go to Gehinnom.
You don't, because if you don't remove the chatoim, then these serve as obstacles of enjoying God, of dvekus. So you remove that, so that whatever Olam Haba he did get through his good deeds, he can enjoy it. Yeah, he can enjoy it. Sure.
Also, when you talk about Gilgul, it's complicated because you come back, let's say, second time,
Yeah.
instead of going to Gehinnom. You have 60-40, fine?
Which is worse, physical or Gehenna?
You come back here to suffer again, but you can change all the numbers. You can make averos, or you can make mitzvahs. If you make mitzvahs, it won't be 60-40, it's going to be 80-20. Or if you make averos, it's going to get worse.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But
it's the problem. You know,
yeah, okay. So obviously God takes that, so God takes that into
I've heard
a system.
That given the choice,
You know.
the Shama would always take Gehenna because it's
Sure.
it's safer.
Well, because he can't sin in Gehenna. Well, you never know. Some guys actually can sin in Gehenna.
It says
You never know.
Say that some people, when they have to come back, they have to come back as a handicaps and stuff like that.
Correct. So they can't exactly. Yeah. Or they come back.
Sometimes,
Unfortunately, people really sin who have a lot of like 48% bad, right? So they don't come back just in general. They come back retarded. I mean, really, really, really severely handicapped. Those are the people who are really severely handicapped, where they come back just to expiate. That's the end of it.
I heard that those were tzaddikim because they have to accomplish something, and Hashem wants to make sure that they don't ruin what they already have. Just the opposite, they're tzaddikim.
These rules go for
You don't know.
God.
You don't know. Not everybody's a tzaddik. Either way. Exactly.
It could be either way.
Who says it's tzaddik? Some of them are. That's true. So they just have to remove. But I'm not talking about a child, an infant, let's say, that dies after 3 months. That's a tzaddik. But somebody who survives, lives, and he dies at 30 or 40, having terrible, emotional, mental problems. I don't see that. I don't see that. Tzaddik. No. It wouldn't be that way. It wouldn't be that way.
These rules go for non-Jews too. Same thing.
The what?
These rules go for non-Jews also.
Yes. Yeah. Eventually, it would go. Yeah.
A retarded non-Jewish child.
Yeah, they suffer. Sure, it's a terrible suffering.
He was. So can he connect the?
Yeah, well, you don't know because you don't know if he has to suffer and then be annihilated. It's not necessarily, because of that. Remember, everybody has to get rid of their sins. The question is, do they get the future world? So they have to have a majority. But they have to no matter who you are, whatever sins you have must be expiated. Now, if your majority is sin, you still have to expiate it. Doesn't make a difference. That's justice, So take a guy like Hitler, he can live 1,000 lifetimes and he still cannot expiate what he did. Now, how do you expiate 55 million people? That's how many people died in World War II. Because that man lived 55 million people, not just 6 million Jews, but 55 million people died in World War II.
How many suffered?
And that's them. And then how did they die, right? And what about all the kids that they would have had and the generation that would have come after them? I mean, we can't even imagine what this man did. It's incomprehensible. Only God knows. So I don't care. You send him back, 400 lifetimes, and in each one he comes back terribly handicapped and whatever. It's not enough. It's not enough. He's in Gehenna to this day. You know what I'm saying? And then after he finishes Gehenna, it's gone. You know what I'm saying? All these guys have no idea what's waiting for them. So we don't really know, and so on, what the story is.
The link for my pack on the High Holy Days in the lake. I thought I got rid of it.
You remind me of this story, There was once a Rebbe, he was, on what do you call it, Tashlach, so he's throwing the stuff, and not everything went into the water because there was a wind. Someone would come back on the floor, So he turns around, he sees one of his Hasidim, what I'm saying, picking up his crumbs. Whatever came back and land. So he says to the Chassid, I don't understand, these are my Averis. What are you picking up what are you picking up my Averis for? He says, I want to tell you something, Rebbe, maybe to you the Averis, but to me, your Averis are mitzvahs. Alavai, I should have your type of Averis. To me, it's a tremendous mitzvah